say, stop the war, not in my name, not in your name, stop the war. That is going to be the chant today. Yeah? Stop the war, not in my name, not in your name.
No. We've also got a placard which is about we're down with attacks on Syria, and at the same time we don't support the rebels because we know what those forces are.
First of all, we don't even know who the rebels are. It's a collection of people. Do we know what their agenda is?
Exactly. Well, we know that they want if they want the British and the Americans to get involved, they can't have a particularly good agenda for the Syrian people.
But it would be the same that happened with Al Qaeda. You nurture a monster because you oppose Iraq. You think anything is better than Assad. Then the rebels take control. We don't even know who they are. We don't know what their allegiances are. Then we get a worse opponent than before. We don't learn.
No. Would you like a copy of the paper? We've got it. It's just 50p.
Hi, we're from Brent. That's why I said I saw Brent Stop The War because I'm from Brent. That's why I made it.
Brent music version.
A year ago today, 38 men slaughtered by British-owned Loman Company. No accountability. It is wrong. Join us, brothers. Imperialism. Hands off Syria.
China da shi. China.
I've been told you to cheer him
Well, the thing was, it would have been big. Obviously, a lot of people probably thought, oh well,
they have voted, we are not going to.
yeah, it's all over now. Whereas in fact, I didn't trust the guy through.
Thank you everyone for coming today. I'm Jeremy Corbyn MP, Chair of Stop the War Coalition, and this demonstration is jointly called by Stop the War Coalition and the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. And I want to thank both organisations for the huge effort that's been put in over the past couple of weeks in lobbying MPs, in making the public case for us not to be involved in yet another war. And the culmination of that was the vote in Parliament on Thursday night. I hope this is the start of a sea change where Britain doesn't automatically go to war when the USA asks it. We don't go and bomb people.
No, we don't.
Instead, we do solidarity, we do human rights, we do support. We don't send weapons. You don't bomb people in order to bring about peace. You bring about peace by not bombing people. On Thursday in Parliament, it was like the ghost of Iraq and the ghost of Afghanistan and the ghost of Libya were all walking round the chamber. £30 billion, hundreds of thousands dead, hundreds of British soldiers died. Hundreds of people denied their civil liberties. Guantanamo Bay still in existence. The security state of the USA and Britain oppressing people's freedom, civil liberties and human rights, all a consequence of Bush's war on terror in 2001. The vote on Thursday night was a bit of a change to something more rational and more peaceful in the future. But it's not our job to stop here, it's our job to redouble our efforts for peace and for non-Western intervention. We're going to have a rally this afternoon with a number of people who are speaking, and we hope to finish the rally around 3 o'clock. Because it's such a lovely day, you can then enjoy a well-deserved cup of coffee or something afterwards. Can I ask you to give a very warm welcome to our first speaker, who was there at the beginning, who helped to found the Stop the War Coalition, and has been a brilliant worker and advocate for peace ever since. Please give a warm welcome to Lindsay German.
Thank you very much, not just for coming today, not just for lobbying and demonstrating this week as so many of us has done, but thank you for everything that everybody has done over these past 12 years to oppose the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya. Because we should be clear what happened on Thursday night. This was a victory. It was a victory in Parliament. It was the vote that the politicians should have had the guts to hold 10 years ago, and they didn't. And it was the result of every bit of anti-war campaigning that ourselves and millions of other people have done. Every argument that we put has turned out to be true, and everything the warmongers said has turned out to be lies. We have had 3 major interventions in 12 years, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya. Every single one we were told they would save lives. Every single one of them has cost lives, has made refugees, has made the country less stable. And that is why millions of people around the world do not believe them when they say they're doing this to save the lives of people in Syria. It is not about that, it is about getting control of the region, and that is what all of the wars have been about. This week we made that possible, and you can see that David Cameron, you can see what a weak and unpleasant Prime Minister he is, but he has been defeated, and he can be defeated again. And we don't just want to defeat him over these wars. I'm fed up with the scapegoating and racism and Islamophobia that has gone on as a result of these wars. And I have to say now, I'm absolutely fed up with the view of this vote that somehow it's about that we don't care about people in the Middle East, or we're isolationists and we only care about what happens in Britain. People in this country feel very, very strongly about what is happening to people in the world. We hate seeing people dying in wars. We hate seeing the 2 million refugees that we now see in Syria. But let's remember that wasn't the worst humanitarian disaster of this century, as William Hague told us. The worst humanitarian disaster of this century was the Iraq War, which had 1 million dead and 4 million refugees. But we're not here to say we want to cut ourselves off from people elsewhere in the world. I believe in international cooperation. I don't believe in Little Englandism. I don't believe that UKIP should be welcome at this demonstration with their terrible racism and anti-immigration stance. Stop the War is about something very different. It's against Islamophobia, it's against dividing people on the grounds of nations, and it's about creating peace and justice. And David Cameron has now received a serious blow. I think we should continue to campaign against Barack Obama and his attempt to take this war further. It's amazing, Tony Blair's the envoy for peace in the Middle East and Barack Obama has the Nobel Peace Prize. What kind of priorities give these two warmongers the right to be regarded as pacifists? We need to campaign against Obama, and we will be at the the American Embassy on Tuesday night, please come and join us. But it's also about saying what kind of priorities. We do not have the money for housing and education and health. We're cutting people's benefits for some of the poorest people in this country, but suddenly we have money for yet another intervention. So let's say we're against Cameron wars, we're against his austerity as well, and we want to fight for a fairer system, a more equal system, and a system where we end wars and equality and poverty. And this is what the movement should now move on to do. On the 29th of September, we'll all be going to Manchester to demonstrate outside the Tory party conference, and we will be back here. We'll be back here demonstrating against Obama, against the further attacks, against the possibility of more wars in the Middle East. So thank you all again for everything that you've done. Keep campaigning, keep struggling, and never let anybody say that demonstrating doesn't work. Our demonstrations have worked. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Lindsay. Today the eyes of the world are on London, and today you thousands will inspire the people of the world as we inspired them on February the 15th. We have broken the bloody chains that bind us to the United States. We will no longer pay the blood price for our alliance with that country. And we have also defeated the warmongering government of David Cameron. Please welcome our next speaker. Andrew Murray was chair of the Stop the War Coalition for a decade. Now he's here representing Unite the Union, one of the foremost anti-war trade unions. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed, Kate. Today is, of course, a day of victory, but we must start with a sober note that despite the historic events on Thursday, war is still imminent, and while the huge political impact of the MP's decision will reverberate, the military situation remains alarming. Our first message today has to be to President Obama, and it is this: if the case for war cannot be approved by a British Parliament that has approved every case for war for the last 200 years, then there is no case for war. Yes, we want an end to the civil war in Syria. Yes, we mourn the deaths of all of those, whether they are being killed by chemical or conventional munitions. But we also know that the only solution in Syria is a political one, that it must come from the Syrian people, that it would be helped by an end to all forms of outside interference, and that President Obama must recognise there is not a single problem in the Middle East, as history shows, that cannot be made worse by Anglo-American military bombardment. So President Obama, London calling, stop the war!
Stop the war!
Of course, our next message has to be to our own political elite. Yes, this has been a defeat for David Cameron, but it has been more than that. It's been a defeat for all of those in a bipartisan, sometimes tripartisan elite who have backed the recent wars of this century. The best reason David Cameron could come up with for saying we should bomb Syria was, we cannot stand aside. Well, we did not stand aside in Afghanistan. Instead, we have killed thousands of Afghanis and sent our old soldiers to die for a corrupt, despotic regime. We did not stand aside in Iraq. We killed 1 million people and wrecked a nation for a generation. We did not stand aside in Libya. Instead, we have bombed that country into sectarian and ethnic chaos. It is past time that we stood aside. It is past first time that imperialism stood aside and allowed the people of the Middle East to make their own future free from the threat of war and bombardment. And on the subject of standing aside, perhaps it's time David Cameron looked in the mirror and stood aside himself. But it's not just David Cameron, it's not just the Tories. We've just had Lord Ashdown. The Lord Ashdown for whom internationalism means war, the Lord Ashdown who is forever preening himself for a colonial governor's uniform, he has said he's never been so ashamed of his country. Well, let me say to you, Lord Ashdown, your country has never been so ashamed of the Liberal Democrats who voted for war on Thursday under Nick Clegg. And also, I know it's been said before, it's been said by me, it's been said by many others, but it does, I think, this week bear repetition. We should not forget to mention the grotesquely misnamed Middle East peace envoy, whose answer to every issue in the Middle East is war, who has been bobbing around on an oligarch's yacht in the Mediterranean this last week, urging war again against Syria. We have to say, Tony Blair, this week you have been consigned to the past. Next week you should be consigned to The Hague. My final point, brothers and sisters, is this. It has been said that Thursday's vote was a triumph for democracy, and it was, but in a far more profound way than most people recognise. It was not just a matter of making the executive accountable to MPs. It's about making Parliament accountable to the views of the people. That is democracy, and the seeds of Thursday's victory were sown long ago. They were sown when we assembled here 12 years ago, the first Stop the War coalition rally, to warn against the dangers of an attack on Afghanistan. They were sown in March 2003, February 2003, when millions of us marched against the threat of war in Iraq, but were ignored by the government. Thursday's victory was not about MPs, certainly not about MPs alone. It was about all of us who have marched and demonstrated against the war on terror for the last 12 years. It has taken that long to make the MPs listen, but it is our victory. It's a victory for all of those who oppose the war on Iraq and the occupation of Iraq, the war against Libya, the occupation of Afghanistan, for everyone who has warned these wars will not make this country safer from terrorism, quite the opposite. It is a victory for everyone who has protested and who has not been silent. So if anyone ever says to you, any of the cynics, what good does marching and demonstrating and protesting do? Here is your answer. And for all of you who have marched and demonstrated over the last 12 years for peace, here is our vindication. And if anyone should ever ask you ever again, what war did Stop the War stop? You can look them in the eye and say, this one.
Thank you, Andrew. And Islington North resident, giving it like it is for peace and justice around the world. Last night, I was in North Wales at a wonderful festival for the Victor Jara Music Festival to commemorate 40 years since the coup in Chile, the life of Victor Jara and the life of Salvador Allende. And they asked me to bring a greeting today to say solidarity for peace and justice and for internationalism from the people there, commemorating the loss of so many in Chile at an earlier example of US imperial intervention when they provoked a coup which killed Salvador Allende and 7,000 other people. The spirit lives on for peace and justice all around the world.
We should be in Manchester. We should be in Manchester on September the 29th to oppose this government's privatisation of the NHS, to oppose their austerity drive and to oppose their moves to war should they ever seek to step down that road again. well done for coming today. Well done for all the work you've been doing in keeping the campaign going. No to war, peace and justice. Justice for Palestine, justice for the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and thanks for all the work you do and your union does to educate our young people, but also to promote peace and justice around the world. Thank you very much for all of that. The next speaker barely needs introduction. Somebody who's been at demonstrations as long as I've been around, has been leading the charge for a better world, a peaceful world, a just world, a world free of the yoke of imperialism. Please give a very warm welcome to Tariq Ali.
Friends, when the House of Commons voted through different mechanisms not to go to war and to stop Britain going to war, it was a historic day in British politics for at least half a century. And the reasons for this vote are very clear. 80% of the population of Britain, 80% of citizens were not in favour of this war. They put pressure on their members of parliament, and parliamentarians recognised that to wage war on Syria might lead to electoral problems. So there was a lot of manoeuvring going on. But at the end of the day, we won. And we have to say very clearly and openly, thank you to all the members of parliament from all the parties who decided not to vote for the government resolution committing this country to war. Margaret Thatcher, after winning her victory in the Falklands, said, "Rejoice, rejoice." Our reply is that the House of Commons has voted against going to war. Rejoice, rejoice. And you know one important thing to understand, and I'm tired of saying this, I say it all over the world, that it matters if you have a campaign like the Stop the War coalition in this country, which carries on regardless, whether it mobilizes 1.5 million people or whether it mobilizes 500 people against wars. The fact that such a campaign exists helps to create and sustain an anti-war presence in this country. Now, what is interesting is what this vote has done. After the vote happened, many sectors of the British establishment were in a state of shock. One of them was the BBC, which couldn't believe that this vote had taken place. And if you look at their well-made-up faces as they go on the television screen, they're in a state of shock, saying, what have the politicians done? Because we were all prepared to go to war. If you look at the cover of this week's Economist, war. So all the people who were prepared for war are finding it difficult to adjust to the situation, including many Blairite Labour MPs who didn't realise what was going on and now are asking, what have we done? But whether you did it right or wrong, what you did was right.
Hands off Syria.
And you know, it feels strange. I've lived in this country for 40 years or more. And it really feels strange because you feel for the first time that you're in an independent country. That for once this country has decided not to go to war. And the effect of this vote shouldn't be underestimated. In the United States, the entire American media is talking about it, saying what happened. And congressmen are demanding A number of congressmen are demanding that there should be a debate and a discussion in the US Congress.
Yes.
And today's newspapers are saying that the mood in America is very anti-war. Yes. That if Congress were allowed to meet, if the US Congress were allowed to meet, there is no guarantee that they would vote for Obama to go to war. And the response of the White House and Obama is, we are not going to ask Congress to reconvene, because what we are doing is not really a war, it's just a surgical raid. Well, we've seen these surgical raids before. We saw them in Iraq for 10 years before they finally occupied the country. We saw them in Afghanistan. We are seeing the drone attacks in Pakistan today. So when you decide to go this route, to do what you're planning to do to Syria, effectively it is a declaration of war against a sovereign independent Arab state. And if Obama had the guts, he would say to the Congress, okay, convene, have a debate, get his supporters in Congress to argue the case. Why isn't he doing it? Because they are nervous, because the majority of American citizens, understand this, a majority of American citizens are not in favor of any involvement in Syria. And if you heard the US Secretary of State John Kerry speak yesterday, he said, oh well, Britain is Britain, but our oldest ally was always France. Well, if your oldest ally was always France, why did you punish it when they voted against the war in Iraq? Why did you change the name of French fries to freedom fries? Are you going to change the name back to French fries again? And in effect, in France too there is division. France too is divided, but the Blairite socialist government under Hollande is committed to go to war. But the British vote and the anti-war fervor in this country has taken both Europe and the United States by surprise. I know we are very happy that this vote passed. I know that if that vote hadn't passed, we probably would have had more people out here. But that is an understandable reaction, but a wrong one. Because as long as the United States are planning to bomb Syria, we need to be vigilant and we need to come out in larger and larger numbers. We mustn't just depend on Parliament.
Somebody that I could look to and know exactly what we had to do. But after he stopped being in Parliament to spend more time on politics, we have to do more thinking for ourselves. But Tony Benn is a legend. The president of the Stop the War Coalition, there at the foundation of it, and somebody who has spent his lifetime opposing British imperialism and colonialism. And indeed, I've read some of the stuff that he raised in the 1950s about Britain's appalling colonial record in Kenya, where the atrocities were committed against the Mau Mau people, and his then work on the founding of Liberation, which I now chair. Tony has got a fantastic record of principled internationalism, principled campaigning for peace. Please give a real Trafalgar Square welcome to Tony Benn.
Comrades, this is a very remarkable occasion, because it is an occasion when we are here to congratulate ourselves on having brought about a very significant decision in Parliament last week not to go to war with Syria. And I have been on this platform over many years, from the time of Suez onwards, over 50 years, and usually we have found that we have lost the battle. But what we must remember is that all the campaigns we've been engaged in, have culminated in the decision taken by Parliament last week. Never forget that the British Labour movement has always been in favour of peace. And we do that because there's so many movements against war. We've had the campaign for nuclear disarmament with its fantastic record, Stop the War Coalition and many others, and now we have seen the climax of that. Parliament decided not to launch another war. And we ought to remember that in our campaigns for peace, we have support from all over the world. One of the reasons why the Al-Qaeda movement has grown is because they have seen intervention of many kinds in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Tripoli and so on, and they see this as a campaign by the West to recover its control of the world, and they don't want it and we don't want it, and we are with them in working for peace. Now, just remember this about war. War is not only about weapons of mass destruction. Every British soldier I see with a rifle sent to fight abroad, I think of the consequences. He is there to kill the Taliban, but also to do something else. He makes the wife of the Taliban he kills into a widow. He makes children in Afghanistan and everywhere else into orphans. And we are against that. We are in favour of the peaceful settlement of international disputes, and we are in favour of justice in the world, and that means justice for everybody, not just for friends of the United States and Britain. Now, just remember that the cost of all the wars that we fight are paid for in this country by the cuts that are made in public expenditure. Everyone who finds their benefit has been cut will find that the money saved goes to war, and we don't want it. We won't have it. We demand policy is abandoned and that we move towards a peaceful settlement of international disputes. I came home in a troop ship in the summer of 1945 as an RAF pilot, and I remember hearing the words of the Charter of the United Nations, and they're written in my mind. This is what it said. It said, "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has caused untold suffering to mankind." Those words represent what we stand for, what we believe in, what we are about, and in the case of Parliament last week, an argument we have won. And we must now go on campaigning, build more support, but above all persuade people the most important lesson of all in politics, that if you want a result, you have to campaign for it. Nothing happens by accident. It's when people get on the streets and make their views clear that governments listen, because in a democracy, we have the final right to decide who we want to govern us and what policies we want them to follow. So, this is a very big demonstration called at very short notice, but it means that our work is now beginning all over again to carry the message of peace that we believe in to more and more people, and to be sure that governments have to listen to us.
Completely right. If US military intervention is the answer, then you're definitely asking the wrong question. The struggle for peace continues. We must say, scrap Trident, troops out of Afghanistan, stop arming Israel, hands off Syria, and fund education, not war.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Absolutely brilliant and brilliant work that you do in the NUS and with the student movement.